We have to put a line in the sand and say, hell no, I don't want chicks with dicks in my bathroom, in my dressing room. I don't want to be forced to change in front of a man, period.
Nancy Mace has more ambition to be famous online than every single member of
Doesn't mean
Jersey
she's
Shore
wrong. Doesn't mean she's wrong.
She doesn't want to shower with a man while she's at work in the locker room.
I don't think Sarah McBride is looking to shower next to Nancy Mace.
God bless Donald Trump for drawing a line in the sand, Congresswoman Mace for doing the same. Men are men, and women are women. Welcome back to normal.
Brian, you tweeted about Project 2025. You've got one of the architects sitting right next to me here. What do you want to say to him?
I mean...
You sound like a sore loser, Brian.
Two major conflicts have dominated political debate over the past week, the Ukraine war and the culture war. World War III, well, let's call it World War P. First, President Biden's decision to allow Ukraine to fire American missiles into Russia has triggered an enormous backlash. Critics say it's provocation and escalation. Many of Trump's most influential supporters who backed him in part for his pledge to end the wars in Ukraine and Israel think that President Biden should be leaving the big decisions to the new sheriff in town.
How are you allowed to do that when you're on the way out? Like, the people don't want you to be there anymore. There should be like some sort of a pause for like significant actions that could potentially start World War III. Maybe that would be a good thing that we would like to avoid from a dying former president. Mm-hmm. It's the whole thing is nuts.
I mean, look, I don't know shit about politics.
Zelensky says Putin is terrified. Fuck you, man. Fuck you people. You fucking people are about to start World War III.
Well, the Ukrainians, for their part, say they don't want World War III. They say they didn't want war with Russia either. But they do want to save their country after they were invaded.
Joe Rogan, I listened to your latest podcast. Let me tell you that you're repeating Russian propaganda. Putin's Russia is in trouble, so they want to scare you and people like you. His war was supposed to last 3 days. It has lasted 3 years, thanks to the heroism and sacrifice of us Ukrainians. So you're using the only weapon that Putin really intends to use, propaganda.
Well, on that propaganda point, Trump has a delicate balance to strike. No doubt he wants to end the war and stop the killing, and I wouldn't bet against him being able to pull those things off. But how does he do it without handing Putin a propaganda win and a victory parade through Moscow? There's no way he wants to begin his presidency with that. It's a very complex debate and one that deserves our utmost attention. Unfortunately, Trump's critics appear to be hung up on a different fight, the fight for the right of transgender women to use female restrooms.
Trans women used bathrooms in the Capitol through all 4 years of the Trump administration. It doesn't seem like there was incidents or whatever her concerns out. But much bigger than that, why is this the thing that you're so focused on right now?
Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace has already begun her bullying. I don't understand why this is her welcome.
And Nancy Mace is trying to goad her into a fight she did not sign up to be part of. She's trying to pigeonhole her into being, you have to be this culture warrior who makes this your whole identity, purely because Nancy Mace doesn't like how she chooses to exist. And I think it's gross. I think it's just also so unserious.
Do you really
guys,
think she even cares? I think she's just
she
using
wants
it.
the clicks. She has nothing else to stand on.
Yeah, but it's disgusting. And everybody, no matter how you feel on this issue, should reject it completely. What are they doing? They're doing this so that Nancy Mace can make a buck and send a text and fundraise off an email. They're not doing this to protect people. They're endangering women. They're endangering girls of all kinds. And everybody should reject it. It's gross.
Well, there's one thing we could all surely agree on. Only AOC could argue with a straight face that banning men from women's toilets is putting women in danger. In a moment, we'll debate the latest with Kari Lake and an all-star panel. But first, here to answer the charge herself is Representative Nancy Mace. Well, welcome to you, Nancy Mace. You're one of the most famous people in America this week. I've got to say, I'm behind you on this. I just feel like the most telling part of the election race to me was that the most effective ad of the whole campaign was the one that Donald Trump did directly about this whole issue, saying Kamala's for they, them, Trump is for you. And it was remarkably effective. I think a lot of people, particularly women, but a lot of people, including me, including you, we feel very strongly that this issue of trans athletes in women's sport, trans women in women's spaces and so on, has just got completely out of control. and is unfair, unequal, or even indeed now potentially harmful. Tell me why you feel so exercised about this.
Well, I am deeply passionate about women's rights. I'm the first woman to graduate from the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina. I'm also the very first woman, Republican woman, elected to Congress from my home state of South Carolina. And, this issue is hitting us right in our faces right now. And it's something that I will take a stand on. This is a hill I'm willing to die on to protect women and girls. And the other thing I've been saying too, is that I'm a survivor of rape. I was raped at the age of 16. And about a year ago, I had a deeply traumatic experience, and I was diagnosed with PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, from abuse that I suffered at the hands of a man. And I've lost 30 pounds over the course of the last 12 months. This weekend, in fact, I moved for the 4th time in a year. And so I have suffered the consequences of abuse. And I know firsthand how women's private spaces should be just for women. Rape victims like myself, or any woman for that matter, should not be forced to undress in front of men. And that's what the insanity of the left, that's what their policies are causing, not just on Capitol Hill, but all across the country, in schools, in locker rooms, dressing rooms, bathrooms. This is happening everywhere. And we have to put a line in the sand, big, fat, bold, red line, and say, hell no, no more. Like, I am going to fight like hell for this. I don't want chicks with dicks in my bathroom, in my dressing room. I don't want to be forced to change in front of a man, period. And it's a trigger for me. And I absolutely am going to go to the mat for women and girls everywhere and put a stop to it.
Your critics say when you use phrases like chicks with dicks, you're being deliberately inflammatory, and you're fueling transphobia, that you have essentially a hatred of trans people. What would you say to them?
I would say they're completely off the rails. They're worried about feelings and not facts. And the facts are, Piers, I voted for gay marriage not once, but twice. I have co-sponsored legislation to protect the rights of those in the LGBTQ community. But I draw a line, the insanity of the left that thinks it's okay for a man and his penis to be in our private spaces. And look, Piers, I was receiving hundreds of death threats a day last week. I got over 1,000 death threats. I've had to increase my security. Some guy tried to rush the stage last week trying to get at me. I've had multiple people in front of Capitol Police that were guarding me come up to me and try to verbally or physically accost me over the last couple of days. The fact that you're willing to kill a woman over her right to privacy it's insanity. And I feel like the more that they come after me, the harder I'm going to fight back, the harder I'm going to push back. It's rabid insanity is what it is.
What's fascinating is that you're obviously a conservative, but J.K. Rowling, who's had exactly the same experience that you have for raising exactly the same concerns, she's very much to the left. So they're pretty, non-discriminatory in the abuse and threats that they dish out, the trans lobby over this. And again, I've always said, all I want for trans people is the same rights to fairness and equality that I enjoy and that you enjoy and everybody else enjoys. But what it can't do, and I felt strongly about this for years, it cannot erode women's rights to fairness, equality and safety. And that's really what the nub of this debate is. When you see people like AOC, for example, screeching away about you, what do you feel? Because I always feel with her, on the one hand, she's all for, we've got to protect women's rights for abortion, for example, but she doesn't give a damn about 6'5" biological males dominating women's sport or getting into boxing rings in women's boxing at the Olympics and winning gold medals by beating up actual women when they have male chromosomes. So it's a complete double standard. And I think it's partly one of the reasons they got such a thumping in the election, because I think most people are like, you know what? This stuff's nuts.
Totally. And you saw Kamala Harris. She won women at a lesser margin than Joe Biden did. When he won in 2020, he won women by plus 13 points. Kamala won women by 8 points. And so women are trending away from the Democrat Party. And in fact, just a few minutes ago before we got on to tape this interview, I heard from yet another Democrat woman who is sick and tired of being marginalized by the left. And I've heard from lesbians, I've heard from gays, and, they're like, we understand you want to protect our rights and this goes too far. We get it. We support you. And so I appreciate I'm grateful for everyone of every political stripe, every orientation who said, we're with you, because this is going to take an army to push back against 1/2% of the population. And literally they're putting my life in danger. I've been called an extremist, a right winger, and I am conservative, but what they're doing, the violent rhetoric they're using, is putting the life of my life and my kids' lives in danger. And it's not okay. And I'm just going to fight back. I'm going to fight back harder.
Well, it is absolutely shocking that you've been receiving all these death threats. It's shocking. It's outrageous. It's shameful. And it comes from a group of people on the left who love to put #BeKind in their X profiles and claim they stand for empathy and compassion and so on. They don't show any of that to people like you or J.K. Rowling, who stand up over the parapet. I think of Riley Gaines as well, who's been incredibly brave in the sports issue and has had similar experience where she's been literally barricaded in buildings as howling mobs have descended on her. There's a real hypocrisy there, isn't there? That the Be Kind Brigade are often the most vicious.
The party of joy, the party that says they're going to protect women, they're only going to protect trans women. I mean, that's kind of where we are right now. And I've been saying this for a long time now, that Republicans and conservatives are going to protect women. And we're literally seeing this unfold in real time. The way that I have been treated, the bigotry that's out there, the hatred, the evil, the threat of violence, the threat of killing me, the threat of raping me, because I don't want male genitalia in my bathroom, because I don't want to be forced as a rape victim to have to undress in front of men. Like, that's just not, it's not okay. It infringes upon our rights as women, the rights of girls. And I've heard from a number of people all across the country who agree, men and women alike, and I'm deeply appreciative of it. But this fight doesn't stop here. So I got the speaker to change the policy on the Hill, but I have since filed federal legislation to protect women in federal facilities, federal property. That would include federal prisons. I mean, there are men who identify as women who are rapists sitting in federal prison in women's units, continuing to violate women. That's
it's completely outrageous. In fact, the first minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, one of the reasons she lost her job was because she allowed a male rapist to basically stick his hand up, claim to be a woman, and then be transferred to a woman's prison, where he was then surrounded by potential new prey. I mean, it was almost beyond parody.
And it's happening here in our country. And so then I'm going to file a third bill when we go back in session December for any facility or property that receives any federal funding anywhere in the country. It's going to stop there too. And then I'll have a very specific prison bill to protect women in prison. I've done prison reform in the past for women, and it looks like we got to do it again as well as a standalone.
I want to play a clip. This is Sarah McBride, who's the first transgender woman to be in Congress, recently elected. She said this on CBS News, Face the Nation.
Every bit of time and energy that is used to divert the attention of the federal government to go after trans people is time and energy that is not focused on addressing the cost of living for our constituents.
What's your response to that?
Well, I mean, the misogyny, women can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can do more than one policy at any given time. I've filed almost 100 bills in my first 2 terms in Congress. I work on a lot of issues. This isn't the only one, but it's certainly the one that has touched a chord with women across the country from both parties. And I'm going to continue to work hard and fight for them while I'm stemming the tide of inflation and out of control government spending that's been caused by both parties for decades now. We need to stem the tide of illegals crossing into our country, invading our country illegally, and we've got to protect women. We can do all those things all at the same time. There's nothing to stop women who work hard.
Have you heard from President-elect Trump in the last week since all this started?
I have heard from folks that will be in his administration that are part of his team, and they support me in this endeavor. And they saw what you saw, Piers, and that ad, they and them, and versus he's for you. And they support me on this policy, and I hope they'll support me in the future bills that we're filing as we speak now.
Well, Nancy Mace, I appreciate you joining me. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Well, joining me to discuss this and more, Kevin Roberts, president of the Heritage Foundation and architect of Project 2025, and the author of Dawn's Early Light, Kari Lake, a leader in the America First movement, with whom I've had many spirited debates over the years, legendary journalist and commentator Geraldo Rivera. Great to have him back on Uncensored, and the host of No Lie with Tyler Cohen. Tyler Cohen. Let me go to you, Geraldo, first. A, because I love talking to you, and it's great to have you back.
Thank you.
B, because this election result did not go the way that you anticipated, or indeed the way you voted. Do you think that one of the reasons, I think it was threefold. One, economy stroke cost of living, no question. Secondly, the crisis on the southern border and the whole issue of illegal immigration. But thirdly, what the left like to call a culture war, but actually what Trump has said is a sort of battle for common sense. And one of the things for common sense being this issue of trans people in women's spaces. Do you think that was we know that ad, the Kamala's for they, them, Trump's for you, was very effective. Do you think it had a bigger impact than people realize?
I think it certainly had a huge impact, and you're absolutely right about the three pillars of what happened: the southern border, the economy, and this trans issue. But the trans issue, to be equated with those two monumental, profound, earth-shaking issues, is exactly my problem with the issue. It's not half of 1% of the American people, as Congresswoman Mace suggests. It's 1% of 1%. It's a tiny. I heard there were 40 cases. For the whole country to be obsessed with this issue is extremely distressing.
Geraldo, you're a big sports fan like me. There was a United Nations report that came out 2 weeks ago, and it said that 900 medals had gone to trans athletes around the world, thus depriving actual biological women athletes from winning medals. That's not a small, insignificant thing. And what you're beginning to see are more and more cases of trans athletes beginning to dominate in women's sport. And it led, inevitably, I felt, to the farce at the Paris Olympics, where Iman Khalif won the gold medal in a women's boxing competition after one of the women who fought against Iman Khalif had to quit after 40 seconds because she'd never been hit that hard in her life. And Iman Khalif has been widely reported now and was banned from the World Championships earlier than the Olympics because of this, for having male chromosomes. In other words, is for all intents and purposes, a biological male. With your sports hat on, knowing how important the integrity of sport relies on fairness and equality, you can't be happy about that.
I am not happy about it at all. And I believe that your biological identity is pretty easily determined, or should be, in terms of what is appropriate for athletic competition or which bathroom you use. But I also think that this issue has been used, you talk about culture war, this issue has been used to aggravate a kind of unrest, a kind of division in the country. It really is exacerbating, and people are exploiting the issue in a way that is extremely troubling to me, rather than, for example, you make an accommodation for people who say they are on transition. I use a cane now. There's a restroom for handicapped people that, generally speaking, is one person at a time. Let them use that one. There are ways to accommodate this
I agree with
without
that.
making it so silly to be so exaggerated as a
Geraldo,
so
I could not agree more. And in sport, I think it's very straightforward. You just say that all trans women athletes, you have your own category, or you compete in the male category, which is the one that most of them have previously competed in, albeit almost always far less successfully. And that's the point. They are far more successful trans athletes when they switch to women's sport than they ever were in men's sport. And that is my big problem with this. That's why we separate the sexes at the Olympics. Otherwise, women would win no medals. Everyone knows that. Otherwise, why would we separate them? Kari Lake, welcome back to you. I'm sorry about your loss. Not as sorry as you probably are, but nice to have you. Their loss is our gain, Kari. So welcome to the Uncensored as always. This whole issue of the culture war, including the trans thing, but also what Trump called the core of common sense. I do feel that particularly with men, you know, millions more of whom gravitated to Trump, whether they were black men, Latino men, white men, whatever, I think they do care about this stuff, and they voted with their feet.
100%, and men and women. I mean, fathers out there having to think about their daughter going into a locker room and having a biological boy or man in there with their daughter put their foot down and said, hell no. And let me tell you, I applaud Congresswoman Mace for standing up and taking a stance on this. You know, people have to realize that in Congress, many of these congressmen and women live right there in their office because they can't afford to have a home in their home district and also one in Washington, D.C. So this isn't just about going to the restroom. It's about showering and getting ready in the locker rooms. And you know what? We're tired as women of mentally ill men playing dress up, trying to act like they're women. We're not going to surrender our womanhood to this anymore. And as a country, we need to stand up and say enough. Enough is enough. We've had great strides as women, and we're not going to hand over those strides and be disappeared by this transgender movement. And we've got to stop pushing it in our schools on our children. You know, when I was growing up many years ago, I grew up and went to a rural school, and there were no transgender kids. Nobody even knew what that term was. And now today in that same rural school, I'm told there are 12 or 13 kids in the junior high who believe they're transgender. This is being pushed on our children. It's very dangerous. And we just saw this story today, and it brings a tear to my eye because I've gotten a chance to meet the father, Jeff, who just lost custody of his 12-year-old son. The courts in California have taken away his custody because he wants to protect his son from being sterilized by this crazy movement that is out to get our children. And we got to stop sometime. This is not normal. It's not the new normal, and we will never accept it.
Yeah, I agree. Brian, you and we've debated this quite a lot, actually. I want to play you a clip, because you might be surprised where I go with this, but I want to play you a clip. This is from an interview I did with President Trump in his first term in office about the issue of transgenders in the military, which is rumoured overnight that he wants to ban all transgender women from the military. Let's take a look. The cost of the medication is minuscule compared to the overall budget, right? You accept that. The US military spends a lot more money, for example, on giving Viagra to service men and women, or service men.
I didn't know they did
than it does actually on medical bills for transgender people. Yeah. And so it just seems to me an unnecessary thing for a guy who wants to be supportive of LGBT rights and the community around the world, that you've taken this action.
Well, it is what it is. Look, massive amounts. And also, people were going in and then asking for the operation. And the operation is $200,000, $250,000. And getting the operation, the recovery period is long, and they have to take large amounts of drugs after that, for whatever reason, but large amounts. And that's not the way it is. I mean, you can't do that.
So Brian, this all got very analysed at the time, and there's no doubt you are allowed to take a lot of pharmaceutical substances if you're in the military. So that point was corrected. I think he had a point about the surgery. You know, if you have trans surgery and it takes you out of work for a sustained period of time, I can see why that would be difficult. But I didn't really, and I don't really now, understand why trans people can't serve in the military. I mean, the whole argument about the sport thing goes out the window because, frankly, if trans women in the military are stronger or better or faster than women standing next to them, who cares, right? It doesn't matter. Stronger the better. So on that part, I think that is more controversial to me.
Yeah, I think it puts on full display the extent to which he and the vast majority of Republicans aren't actually in this for legitimate reasons. They're just doing it to stoke panic about trans people because they recognize that as a culture war issue, it benefits them. Look, going back to Nancy Mace, you know, she explains on a weekly basis how she was the victim of sexual assault, including in this very previous segment with you. And yet, you know, and to that point, you know, I feel for her, and I think that's absolutely also awful. But she also breathlessly supports somebody like Donald Trump, who is an adjudicated rapist and who was credibly accused of sexual assault by 26 different women. So the cognitive dissonance at play here, first of all, is incredible. But second of all, just with regard to Nancy Mace, with regard to Donald Trump, We know why they're doing this. Nancy Mace is not afraid of Sarah McBride chasing her into the bathroom. She's not. She wants to fundraise off this. She wants to be social media famous. She wants to be... Nancy Mace has more ambition to be famous online than every single member of
Doesn't mean
Jersey
she's
Shore
wrong. Doesn't mean she's wrong.
It means that she's doing this to help herself, and she's not actually concerned about this issue.
Yeah, but Brian, come on, look.
Hang on,
Geraldo's a politician doing something to help themselves. If that was a criteria for why we shouldn't listen to them, we'd never have anybody to interview, right? So of course,
I get it, but that doesn't mean we can't call. That doesn't mean we can't call them out.
No, it doesn't mean I can't call you out on the fact that she.
Self-concerned.
I don't think it makes her wrong. So it may be she has other vested interests, but it doesn't necessarily make her wrong.
If she was actually looking for a legitimate way forward, she would do exactly what Geraldo did, which is instead of beating the drum about this and vilifying Sarah McBride to the ends of the earth, this woman who has, by the way, operated with nothing other than class and grace since the moment she was elected to her position, she would have actually just sought a solution. But nowhere in the days and weeks of her, doing the fainting couch spell, has she brought forward any single indication that she's willing to look for a solution? She hasn't said, let's get a different balance. She hasn't said that she's willing.
She has the solution. You ban it. I mean, just bang. That's it.
calling for this one woman to not be able to use bathrooms is not the same as her saying.
It would be any. It's not one woman. It would be any transgender people who are in Congress.
This is an attack. This is an attack. Piers, this is an attack on Sarah McBride. We all know why she's doing this. Don't play dumb here. We know that this is because she.
But I don't think transgender women should be in women's spaces. So I agree with her.
She doesn't want to shower with a man while she's at work in the locker room.
I don't think Sarah McBride is looking to shower next to Nancy Mace. And by the way, if any of these people were actually concerned, then they would all be beating their chests about what Donald Trump has done. But nobody's concerned about it. Donald Trump is, as far as the courts go, as far as these accusations of sexual assault go, he is 10 to the nth degree more dangerous than anybody like Sarah McBride. But of course, nobody talks about him because it's politically convenient because he's part of their political party.
Okay, let me bring in Kevin Roberts from the Heritage Foundation as the president and the architect of the now infamous Project 2025. Kevin, good to see you here in London. You've obviously been, you were deemed so outrageously extreme that Donald Trump even distanced himself from Project 2025, said he never heard of it, which I found slightly unlikely. But you've taken a very strong view about things like LGBTQ rights, abortion, and so on. What many people believe to be a quite extreme conservative view of this. What is your view about where most Americans sit, though?
Most Americans, if they were listening to this discussion, would say that it's baseless and absurd to claim that this is an issue, the issue of a biological man wanting to be in a woman's space as being normal. And it isn't just about one member of Congress. In fact, why don't you go ask the members of the volleyball teams in the Mountain West Conference who literally are under physical assault when a man spikes the volleyball against them, so much so that they, apolitically, Piers, decide they're going to boycott all of these games at the expense of their own careers. Ask Riley Gaines, ask Paula Scanlon, who had to compete against a biological man. Ask Chloe Cole, one of the famous detransitioners, who speaks so eloquently about the pain as a human of going through this transition, which of course is propelled by the kind of nonsense that the transgender ideology industry puts on them. So all of that to say, to answer your question directly, the culture war always comes to our doorstep. This isn't some fabrication of the radical right or conservatives. This is something that is real. It's real in the military. It's real for those of us who have daughters at home and are in these public spaces. And God bless Donald Trump for drawing a line in the sand, Congresswoman Mace for doing the same. This is saying something this radical, Piers. Men are men and women are women. Welcome back to normal.
Yeah, I mean, Geraldo, the point, I guess, is that President Trump, with the thumping scale of his win, when you win the popular vote, the Electoral College, the Senate, the House of Representatives, the White House, when you have a clean sweep, you get to do what you want and you get to do what you said you were going to do. Are you sort of, just turn to that election result for a minute, because you had, like me, we had our ups and downs with Trump over the years, but as in the run-up to the election, you were very clear you could not vote for this guy. And were you surprised that he won in such an emphatic way?
I was shocked by the depth and breadth of his victory. I also was somewhat chagrined looking in the mirror at how ineffective I was in terms of communicating how important it was that he violated our Constitution on January 6th when he encouraged, incited, and unleashed the invasion of our Capitol. But I have to say that on the trans issue, which he brilliantly exploited, generally speaking, America is a pretty reasonable place. Common sense is a pretty much an American trait, British as well. But I feel that this issue, if people were keen on solving it, first of all, if it seems wrong, then it is wrong. If it seems wrong for 6'6" trans men to play volleyball against 5'9" women, then it is wrong. If it feels wrong, it is wrong. So people should seek to fix it, and the way to fix it is the American way, is by compromise. The way to fix it is you don't play men in transition against women, because it is fundamentally.
Well, the thing is, Geraldo, they're on. Look, I don't want to keep talking about this one issue, but the point is there is no actual compromise to be had. You either allow it or you don't. You either recognise the separation of the sexes or you don't. And you either
create a third wave, as you suggested, a third way.
Well, no, the third wave is not a compromise. What that is just explaining there can just be a different category. But what it can't be is competing against women or using women's spaces.
Because it's not fair, and that makes sense.
Yeah, that's what I think. But Geraldo, he's filled his cabinet pretty much completely now. You know, I'm hearing from my sources on the Hill that it's pretty likely that, notwithstanding Matt Gaetz obviously stepping down very quickly, that almost all of the others, if not all of them, are likely to be confirmed. And if you put them all together, you have an extraordinary collection of people with all different political views. They're joined at the hip by the MAGA umbrella, but they all have very different views about so many issues. I'm quite excited by it. And you look at someone like Elon Musk, there are many key issues that Elon Musk would otherwise be described as a liberal. You know, he's really a Democrat in Republican wolf's clothing. Is it interesting to you, as it is to me, that people like Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, Robert Kennedy Jr., all these guys, Tulsi Gabbard, they all used to be basically Democrats, and they felt forced to move to the Republicans because they just think this woke mind virus that Musk, I think, quite accurately calls it, has made the left too bonkers for them.
I agree with everything you said, but I think you left out one key component. That is that many people in this proposed cabinet are, like us, you and I, Piers, veterans of Fox News. And I think that President Trump has had a wonderful relationship over the decades with Fox News, first with Roger Ailes and then with the subsequent management. And they have graduated, and they are communicators, and they are charismatic. And Pete Hegseth had, a wonderful host on Fox and Friends Weekend Edition. I sat on the couch with him many a time. Mike Huckabee, the designated ambassador to Israel, also on Fox News. Sean Duffy, his wife, Rachel Campos Duffy, a weekend host on Fox News. I am delighted that with these Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of Florida, yes, but also a veteran of Fox News and Hannity, and countless times on my Geraldo at Large program. I think that he went for pragmatic communicators. I think they'll do a fine job. Whatever you think of their underlying politics, that doesn't interest me. And in this regard, I care that Major Pete Hegseth can, although he faces a steep learning curve, be an excellent defense secretary. He gets it. He's also a wonderful, eloquent, and effective veterans advocate.
Right.
Pete gets it. Yeah. I think that Pam and Pete are two excellent examples. Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz.
Yeah. Well, they're very, I think the point is that they're all quite different, I think. think, to the normal kind of appointees. And Brian, I've just written a column today for the New York Post about The View, the ABC mid-morning show, because it seemed to me utterly farcical that you have a major network's show mid-morning aimed at America in its entirety, and it's a very popular show, where all 6 hosts, come election day, voted for Kamala Harris. And all 6 of them loathe Donald Trump. And I've done a column saying they love to try and cancel Donald Trump. They've lost spectacularly. He's won against that argument. They should be cancelled, because actually the days of just mainstream media having 98% of the people on it screaming abuse about Trump and all being brazen liberals or Democrats, they're over, aren't they? I mean, you guys took a drubbing. It's done. Toast. You've got to move back to accepting Trump's here for the next 4 years, and you better get with a bit of the program, because the screaming doesn't work.
Piers, do you not see any irony in, after years and years and years of conservatives and right-wingers and you coming forward and saying that cancel culture is bad, we hate cancel culture, this is the reason that the left is losing, and now you're calling for the View to be cancelled?
I'm ahead of you. My final line says, given the enthusiasm with which the View hosts, all of them, tried so hard to cancel Donald Trump, they should maybe take their own lesson and be cancelled. Because it's what they would want. Because they're now the ones, they said Trump was out of step with the American people. They said he was just a little representative of a small number of MAGA people. No, actually, that's not the case. He's had a thumping win across the board. Therefore, the View hosts are out of step with the American people. Therefore, they should be cancelled. And I don't mean get rid of the show. I mean, get rid of them and replace them with a more balanced team. Maybe you have a few men as well. Me and Geraldo could pop in there.
Piers, Trump won his election by a 1.5% popular vote margin in the country. Joe Biden won that by 3 times that much in 2020. The notion that this is some massive repudiation of the Democratic Party and that we have to burn the whole thing down and
Brian,
up from the ashes rise some physics
you're in denial.
Is a joke.
Brian. Look,
I'm not.
And to make your day even worse, by the way, I know you do a bit of work for MSNBC.
Let me finish talking.
Elon Musk is about to buy you.
I'm not in denial about the fact that Democrats have lost, and in fact, I, more than anybody online, I'm sure on the left, has been open to this idea of introspection. What Democrats can do moving forward. But the notion that all of a sudden the Democratic Party is irrelevant when a couple million more people for the second time in this century voted for Republicans in the popular vote over the Democrats.
Come on, Brian. If I said
Piers.
to you 2 years ago, Donald Trump will win the popular vote and the Electoral College and the Senate and the House and the White House, you'd have thought I was stark raving bonkers. You'd have bet your house, you'd have bet your family, you'd have bet every penny you own that could never happen. You've been all caught napping at the wheel, right? You fell asleep at the wheel and you let him drive by and take the whole shebang. I think Democrats should take a long, hard look in the mirror and admit you've just been completely pounded into total, shameful, humiliating oblivion. And you've got to start again. And you've got to find politicians that actually resonate with the American people. And it's not the current shower you've got. Sorry.
So, Piers, in 2020, would you have said the same thing about the Republican Party that lost by a 4.5% margin nationally?
No.
Well, there you go. That's your comment.
No, because I felt the 2020. No, I'll tell you why, since you've asked. Because I felt the 2020 election was effectively a referendum on a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, which affected absolutely everything. If that election had taken place before the pandemic in 2020, say in February, Trump would have won, I think, by a landslide. So I think that's why I say they're different circumstances. Let me bring in Kari here. Kari, Trump's got a remarkable mandate now. I mean, really, I rang him the morning after he won, and even he couldn't quite believe the scale of what was going down in terms of the size of the win. But with that comes a big responsibility, doesn't it? You know, people are looking to him now to fix the southern border, to fix the cost of living crisis, to sort out the wars in Ukraine and Israel and stuff. Are you confident that he can deliver on these promises he's made?
100%. He's done it before. I mean, look at the world that he gave us for the 4 years he was in office. He actually was winding down the endless wars, much to the chagrin of the war machine that wanted to keep things churned up. He brought us the strongest economy across the board. Didn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, black, white, didn't matter your background, what neighborhood you lived in, what zip code, everybody was doing better. He made our streets safer, and he was helping improve life for everyday Americans, whether they voted for him or not. I think he's assembling an incredible team, and I have faith that these nominees will be approved, will be confirmed, and he will get to work immediately, as quickly as possible after January 20th. Hopefully they'll get confirmed right away, starting to turn things around. The American people expect it. The American people got out and voted. They gave President Trump a mandate, and I'm looking forward to seeing these confirmations happen and then get to work on turning things around in Washington, D.C., because God knows we've got to turn things around. The bureaucrats have been in control for far too long, and this is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I'm glad that he's bringing citizens in to help in some of these positions. And you mentioned a few of them. I think Pam Bondi is great. I think we've got some powerful women that have been nominated. And, I'm sure that Mark Cuban is curled up in a fetal position right now, seeing all these strong, intelligent women.
Well, you know what, Kari? You know what? There's two things that made me chuckle. One is the sheer volume of women in this cabinet. It's an incredibly diverse cabinet. And secondly, the fact that it looks like all of America now is doing the Trump dance. And to remind people, the Trump dance is from a song called YMCA. Even Geraldo is doing it. YMCA by the Village People. It is the greatest gay anthem in music history. So Trump, the supposed biggest bigot in America, has literally chosen a gay anthem to get America dancing. I mean, if that isn't a unifying thing, I don't know what is.
Well, you know what? President Trump isn't anti-gay. I mean, it's great music. It's great music. I love the song. I love that people are dancing. I just saw there's a Thanksgiving tradition now going around here in America where people are doing the dance with their whole family. And I think it's unifying.
I love that.
Fun.
You know what? Why not? You know what? A lot of stuff can be solved by dancing. Honestly, it can. If you think about it, you go to a party with your family, you've had a rough old year with your family, the music kicks up, YMCA comes on, you all get dancing, and suddenly you're all back in love with each other. I want to bring in Kevin, because there's some breaking news while we've been talking, that the special counsel, Jack Smith, has now instructed a judge to dismiss the federal election interference case against Donald Trump. He told the judge that the case should be closed because of the Justice Department's policy that bans the prosecution of a sitting president. All this legal stuff against Trump is obviously falling apart now. And I felt that was another key. We haven't really talked about this as being a key reason that he ended up winning. In fact, becoming the nominee again was because of the weaponization of the justice system, which I think is completely inarguable. And the fact that one case they chose to drag him through the criminal court first was over shuffling paperwork over an alleged one-night stand with a porn star 18 years ago seemed to be so ridiculously trivial and frankly pathetic to do that to an American president that actually it massively backfired. And that you saw through the year, actually, I'll tell you when you saw it from when Ron DeSantis was way ahead in the polls to be a Republican nominee. And I interviewed him, I think it was March last year, and he was absolutely looking like he was running away with it. And then the left started to weaponize the justice system, case after case after case. And each time they did it, each time Trump appeared in court, he got more popular, he got a boost in the polls until he became an unstoppable wrecking ball to the very party that was doing it to him. And I felt that, along with one more thing, the shooting at the rally and the way he responded to that, I think that as well was a massive impact on Americans. You thought, you know what, whatever you think of him, that was badass ballsy. Kevin, discuss.
The left always overplays its hand, Piers. We see that in so many issues, starting with the gravest political persecution in modern American history against Donald Trump. That would be really tragic against any American citizen, but particularly against a former president. You see it as they've done it with the transgender ideology, which we were talking about earlier, the lawlessness at the southern border, the lawlessness in American cities, the fact that in our public schools, we're not just teaching wokeness and DEI, but educational attainment has decreased among every demographic group during the 45 years the U.S. Department of Education has been around. It's all of those reasons and those that you mentioned that a majority of Americans have said that Donald Trump is given a mandate for disruption. I think that's what this is. And it is a mandate. If you look at the people he's appointing to his cabinet, they reflect the entire center right, probably 65% of the electorate. I think that it is the beginning of a golden era in American history, Piers. Not just the next 4 years under President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Vance, but I think if they succeed in returning the country to normal, this realignment, which is historic in American history, is going to be around for half a century. I think our friends on the left are shaking in their boots.
Well, let me go to a friend.
Come to grips with it.
Let me go to a friend on the left, Brian, because you tweeted or posted to X on 25th of November about Project 2025. You've got one of the architects sitting right next to me here. You said Trump just named to architect of Project 2025 Russ Vought to his cabinet. But hey, thank God mainstream media didn't just take Trump's tepid denials at face value and slap them in their headlines before the election. So look, you've got an opportunity now. You've got one of the other architects sitting right next to me. What do you want to say to him?
I mean,
now's your chance.
I don't know.
No, that's very articulate.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I mean, I don't know what you mean. Like, I don't have.
Well, you
obviously
have a big problem with Project 2025. You've got one of the architects.
Okay, I have a question for him.
Okay,
I have a question for him.
Yeah.
Why did Donald Trump lie about your report, that he pretended that he didn't know what it was about? I mean, how do you feel when you heard the President of the United States uttering what was clearly an easily discernible falsehood? It really was very distressing. You have some very clever ideas. I read Ayn Rand. I like the Fountainhead and all that. And I consider myself a centrist person. But I agree about lawfare completely. I agree that a president should be immune from criminal prosecution. Also, I agree with you, Piers, about the one-night stand with Stormy Daniels. Ridiculous for him. It was, if anything, it was one misdemeanor, not 34 or 24 felonies, whatever he was charged with. But now I think that the real challenge will be, what will President Trump do vis-a-vis the Ukraine-Russia conflict?
Well, I'm going to come to that, actually, Geraldo, I'm going to come back to that as the next issue. But just on that one point, let me go back to Kevin. I want to play Trump's denials of 2025 knowledge. Let's take a look.
Like some on the right, severe right, came up with this Project 25, and I don't even know. I mean, some of them I know who they are, but they're very, very conservative. I don't know what the hell it is. It's Project 25. He's involved in Project, but I don't know anything about it. I don't want to know anything about it. But what they do is misinformation and disinformation. Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it.
And then he said on
I guess that's the point, Piers, is...
Hang on one sec, Brian. Hang on one sec. I just want to read it. He said on his platform, Truth Social, I've no idea who's behind it. I disagree with some of the things they're saying. Some of the things they're saying are absolutely ridiculous and abysmal. So, Kevin, what was your response when you saw him effectively just totally denounce and distance himself from your project?
That the left spending $75 million mischaracterizing it was working for a few weeks in the campaign. You saw President Trump use the word misinformation. That's exactly what it was. They told only one true thing about the project, Piers, and that was that we want to eliminate the U.S. Department of Education. And ultimately, the great news, and you saw it respectfully of our friend on the panel, Brian, stuttering in an attempt to pursue this, it didn't win. It failed. It was an abject failure. So even all of that mischaracterization, causing the president, understandably, in a political moment to distance himself from it, did not work. This is what the American people are saying. They're tired of the BS from the left. They stopped using this trope in the last weeks of the campaign because they realized the American people were worried about what? The economy, the lawlessness at the border, the fact that men were being called women and women were being called men. And there was one candidate, Donald Trump, who was standing up for that. And guess what? We've done this since 1980. We're going to keep doing it for posterity's sake because it's about revitalizing the American dream.
Okay. I mean, Brian, Geraldo bought you about 3 minutes of time there to try and think whether you had a problem with Project 2025. So now's your chance again.
I do think it's pretty telling that when Donald Trump had the opportunity to talk about Project 2025. All he claimed that he had no idea who was behind it. He had no idea what was in it. He had no idea whether the people who did write it, what they stood for. And
yeah, but as Kevin was saying, he was distancing himself from the
administration right now, including Russ Vought at OMB.
Right.
And yet now, when people don't have the opportunity to vote on it because they've already had that opportunity, suddenly all of these denials about his relationship with Project 2025.
But out of interest, what is your big problem with it?
My big problem with Project 2025 is Schedule F, and this notion that Donald Trump will be able to go in and replace career civil servants with political appointees.
Okay. You sound like a sore loser, Brian.
That's your retort to that?
It's not a bad retort, is it?
Okay, let me put it in the form of a question. Let me put it in the form of a question. Will Donald Trump seek to go in and replace career civil servants with political appointees?
Ask him. He's the president-elect. And it would be a great idea if he did. It's also legal and appropriate because guess what the American people voted for, my friend? Reducing the size of the dramatic overreach of the federal government. Welcome to modern America. It's going to be a normal country.
It's actually not legal because there's a regulation against it, and these federal employees have protections as career civil servants.
You should stop reading Howard Zinn and read some real history, brother.
All right,
that's your response again.
Let me just segue. I want to just segue.
I guess you had all this opportunity. Kevin had all this opportunity to wait and listen, and his response is just that I shouldn't read what I'm reading.
Well, to be honest with you, I did open the door 5 minutes ago, and you blew it, so I've got no sympathy. Let me come back to what Geraldo said about the wars. Two big wars have been raging now. One for 2 years, one for a year. Ukraine and Russia and Israel, Hamas. Trump. I said to someone today, it's not beyond the realms of fantasy that Trump could end up solving both of these wars, given he's a natural deal maker, given that there's a will pretty much on every side now to try and get these things resolved, and that he could end up with the Nobel Peace Prize. Am I mad?
I would love to see it. I would appreciate it more than I can say, that our children's children will not be going to war, that World War III won't be visited upon us. These are two intractable problems that I don't know how in the world they are solved. Does Ukraine give up half of its territory? Do the Israelis trust that Hamas will yield the hostages that have been underground for a year? I think that these are very, very difficult. It's easy to be glib about things, social issues, cultural issues. But when it's life and death, and now with the launch of the intercontinental ballistic missile, of course, didn't go intercontinentally, but it was ballistic missile. It was gravity driven, and it impacted 400 miles away. And I understand that yesterday's news was that the red phone was employed by Russia to counsel our Defense Department that they were not launching an ICBM strike on the United States. I mean, that's bone chilling to me.
It is, but I still think
infuriated by
it is bone chilling. But that's exactly what Putin wants us all to feel: bone chilled. And he's been rattling the nuclear weapons card against us now for 2.5 years. And you know what? Every time a red line's been crossed, he doesn't actually use them. I think he's full of shit.
Piers, though, can you even imagine if this were happening on Donald Trump's watch, and we were being marched straight into World War III, and he was meandering through a Brazilian rainforest, and J.D. Vance was on vacation in Hawaii?
No, I don't disagree with that. I think that is a very valid point. No, I think that's a very valid point. But I do think, I would say to you, Kari, though, I would say what I said to a lot of Republicans is, if you go back 30 years, the idea that any Republicans would be remotely interested in saying that America shouldn't help a sovereign democratic European country repel an invading Russian dictator would have been unthinkable. And yet here we are. Here we are. You've all done a complete volte-face.
$260 billion of our treasure to this country to help. The war was lost when they lost the spring offensive. We should have gone to the negotiating table and brought in our best negotiators to bring peace. This is not a Democrat-Republican issue. This is about bringing peace to the world. And instead, we've got a guy who can't even find his way off a stage allowing this to continue on. If he cares one iota about America, he would get on the phone with Donald Trump and ask him to come in right now and help negotiate peace. I think it can happen. I trust that President Trump can make that happen, but I don't trust that Joe Biden loves this country enough to make that happen.
Yeah, but I think we should also remember who the really bad guys here are, and it's Vladimir Putin and his Russian barbaric invaders, because they did what they did, and they didn't need to do that, and they did it. And I grew up in a big military family, and the idea that a Russian dictator could just invade European countries and help himself to their land would have been completely unthinkable that we would want to accept that.
But how are we trying to stop that? We're just pouring more money into the war instead of trying to stop it.
To which I would say, what price? Freedom and democracy.
Well, $260 billion, and now we're hearing that as much of half of that may have been laundered through Ukrainian officials, and some of it, much of it, coming back into Democrat politicians.
But what would you have said? All right, but Kari, what would you have said in 1939 when Hitler invaded Poland?
No, I'm talking about this war right now.
Well, I'm saying it's a similar thing. You got a total nutcase in charge of invading hordes, invading a sovereign European democratic country.
Piers, America is bearing the brunt of the funding of this, and I don't see Europe clamoring to throw their treasure in like America.
Britain has actually given more than any other European country, but I take your point. I do think
not more than America.
Well, I do. No, of course, and I do think America always has to get the lion's share. Brian, just quickly, these two wars, Trump says he can fix them. They're very complicated, both of them, in terms of not just what's happened in the last year or two, but also historically. The history of these conflicts. Do you think he can pull off peace?
I think that Donald Trump has shown through his own rhetoric and even his cabinet appointments, including somebody like Tulsi Gabbard as DNI, I think he's shown whose side he's on. I mean, the fact that Kari Lake can't even come forward and say that a warmongering totalitarian dictator seeking to take the territory of a sovereign country is bad, and just waving her hands around about money, and that's more important than protecting the sovereignty of a free country. Especially one, by the way, who is aligned with China, and they've got territorial ambitions as well, including Taiwan, and we have a vested interest in terms of our economy of having Taiwan be a free state. The fact that all of these people can't take a clear-eyed view of this because they're so aligned with, I don't know whether it's Putin and that axis of evil, whether it's just focusing on making the U.S. more like the illiberal state that Russia is. I'm not sure which one it is. I get why they see a lot of Putin in Donald Trump, and so they're putting on full display which side they're on. So do I think that they're going to seek peace for in deference to democracy in the world? No, I think that Donald Trump has already shown which side
that's
he's
where
on.
liberals go wrong when they compare Putin to Trump. It's like with all that Nazi stuff. It was so.
Yeah.
It's so.
But I didn't call him a Nazi.
It hurts me because it's.
I didn't call him
so,
a Nazi. I said
no, you didn't.
There are authoritarian leanings
totalitarian.
between Putin and Trump.
There's no comparison.
Geraldo, Donald
Canada.
Trump tried to subvert the election result. He tried to subvert a free and fair election, incited an insurrection on January 6th. Don't memory hold this.
And he was impeached for it. He was impeached for it. That's the way we judge
you know that
impeachment.
You know that an impeachment process counts for nothing when you have an entire
that's
Congress
that's what
under
I'm afraid we've run out of time. We've run out of time. Great panel. Lovely to have you all. Please come back again. I enjoyed that very much. Great to see you. Thank you.
Thanks. Great seeing you, Piers.